Hey, welcome. I am a rather hoarse Jeffrey Sachs, which is fine because we're here to listen to Wendy, not to me. But welcome to our fourth and final session with Professor Wendy Zierler, Sorrow Song. We've been looking at Hebrew women's poetry in a time of war. Those of you that so loved this opportunity to study and to be and to engage with Wendy Zierler are welcome to join us. We have a few spots left on our trip to Poland, and Wendy is coming along. And one of the highlights of the trip is always the opportunity to learn with her as well. So join us on our trip to Poland. You've received the link and the information uh, for the trip multiple times by now. But if you're debating, now is the time to grab your spot. Next week we'll have a special one-off session in this same time, same slot, noon Eastern time, which is still only going to be 6 hours behind Jerusalem time, 6 p.m. in Jerusalem. A special conversation between myself and Professor Netta Stahl of Johns Hopkins, together with our friends at the Jewish Review of Books. In their most recent issue, which was dedicated completely to events surrounding October 7th and the war and everything that's been happening over these past 5+ months, it happened that both Netta and I had articles in that issue, both of which used the writing of course, Shai Agnon as a starting point to talk about contemporary events. So she and I are going to be discussing those essays. You can join us on the links that were sent to you. They'll be put in the chat next Sunday, a week from tonight. But tonight, of course, we turn our attention to, what I'm sure for many of us is the figure of all the figures we've discussed, the figure that's most familiar to us because she is most known to us through the music, which is literally the soundtrack of life here in Israel and of to a very real extent of Jewish life around the world, at least for people that are attuned to certain trends in Israeli music. There's no way around it. If we're talking about poetry that responds to trauma and the war, there's a lot of okets, there's a lot of sting. But hopefully tonight we'll also get to taste a little bit of the sweetness of the dvash, the okets, v'hadvash, hadvash, v'okets, and I assume those of you that are familiar with Naomi Shemer's uh, writing and songs, you know what I'm talking about. And if not, I'm certain Wendy will fill us in. So, Wendy Zierler, take it away.
Hi, everybody. It's so lovely to see you, faces of people that I traveled with. I want to actually begin tonight. Give me a moment to share my screen. I want to begin by getting personal and also constructing a bridge between today's class and what we've been talking about for the past 4 weeks. Um, every single one of the poets that we've been studying in this mini course, Rachel Murpurgo, Rachel Blavstein, Rachel Meshoreret, Leah Goldberg, and today Naomi Shemer, are writers, poets, songwriters that I have been teaching over the past 4.5 years as part of a project that I call Shir Chadash El Yom. Every Tuesday morning after morning minyan, I give a short class about a Hebrew poem that I've selected, translated, and for the purpose of connecting it to matters of tefillah, issues of the day, and so forth. And that project began in the aftermath of my father's tragic death. My father was hit and struck killed by a distracted truck driver. And I knew that I was going to need to face the year of Kaddish. I was going to need to be able to bring something of my idiosyncratic approach to tefillah into the experience. And I committed myself early on that every Tuesday I would give this class. Unfortunately, he was killed on a Tuesday. My mother died like just a few days before the Kaddish for my dad was supposed to end. So it ended up being 22 months straight. And his fifth yahrzeit is coming up next week. And so I actually came, what immediately precedes this class was a trip to the cemetery with my sister. And so I'm very much in the mode of the Shir Chadash Shel Yom being this means of commemorating and coping with a personal tragedy. That also, my way of coping with it was to bring the personal into the communal, the setting of communal prayer. And in the spirit of constructing a bridge between last week's experience and the week before, what we've been talking about, and my personal entry point into this material. So when you're at the cemetery, uh, what's on the screen in front of you is the Birkat Bet HaKfarot, the tefillah that's suggested that one recite at the cemetery. You may recall from last week, the conclusion of our discussion of Leah Goldberg included this poem that she wrote right before her death. We talked about how it seemed very similar to high holiday liturgy, but it actually is very conspicuously similar to this tefillah. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher yatzar etchem badin v'zan v'kilkel etchem badin v'hemit etchem badin. If you look over to the left, I made sure to bring
No,
that poem
no,
that
no, she's English.
at the end of last week's class to just show you this uncanny juxtaposition that I have just experienced by what I had to do with my sister this morning and going to the cemetery. And this all gives me an opportunity to talk about some of the running themes that we've been looking at over these past 4 weeks, as a way of trying to bring it all together, seeing the commonality between the various women poets, and in this case, songwriters. I mean, all of the poets, with the exception of Rachel Morpurgo, Rachel HaMeshareret, Leah Goldberg, Naomi Shemer, there's an overlap between poetry and song. The Rachel and Leah Goldberg's poems have been so famously set to music in Israel. And of course, Naomi Shemer is this foremost songwriter and chronicler, in a sense, of the experience of life in the state of Israel in the wake of various wars. So the various themes that we've been looking at are, number one, apropos of our study of Rachel stealing the idols, this idea of stealing the language, making a woman poet coming into the tradition and very deliberately and in a canny form invoking classic references from our tradition to make it, to sort of authorize her entrance into this tradition, but also to smuggle in meanings that maybe are not conspicuously evident unless you take the trouble to look closely. And in that vein, we've looked at poems that many people think are so simple, and yet we've shown that they're artful and constructed and deliberate and filled with complexity. We've shown how seemingly or purportedly secular poetry, that's not the case of Rachel Morpurgo, who was actually quite conspicuously religious. But in the case of Rachel Blavstein, Leah Goldberg, these were secular poets. Naomi Shemer, similarly, coming from the secular kibbutz movement. And yet there is an unmistakable religious quality to it. In which Zionism becomes a kind of religious content, the spirituality around Zionism, around the kibbutz, around working the land, and also the conversation that these poems engage in with classical tradition. We've talked about the fact that our traditional Siddur completely lacks, omits, does not include a single text written by a woman, and how these various poets, in a sense, offer their candidacy, offer their works as candidates for additions to this Siddur, how they can be seen as tefillot. The title of the course, Sorrow Song, engages with the female tradition of lament, which is a feature of women's cultural production in the world over, not only in the Hebraic tradition, but we do know that in the Bible, women were originators of Kina. They were lamenters. And so we have seen how their poems participate in this tradition of sorrow song. And with that in mind, not only the okets, but the dvash, as Jeffrey set it up, we see the way in which this poetry, especially when set to music, becomes part of a toolkit to respond to trauma, but also to create strategies of resilience, of continuity and perseverance. And so we're going to be looking at all of this hope as much as we can, as much as we can get through in the limited time that I have with you. Just a few bits of biography about Naomi Shemer, whose dates are 1930 to 2004. I think it's fair to say that Naomi Shemer was Israel's greatest songwriter. She was like the poet Rachel, a product of the kibbutz movement. Her family immigrated to Palestine from Vilna. So those of us who were in Lithuania together, like we're experiencing a Vilna moment. Her family settled in Kibbutz Kinneret, which was one of the legendary kibbutzim in the Galil, where Rachel Blavstein also lived for a time. She showed her musical talents very, very early on, leading Arvei Shira in the kibbutz when she was still a child. She served in the Nachal and joined its cultural division and composed songs for the Central Command, that Lakat Pikud Hamerkaz. And we're going to be hearing some video, hearing some music, recordings from way back from Lakat Pikud Hamerkaz. She also went on to become a songwriter for theater troupes in Tel Aviv, for Israel's most beloved singers and songwriters, excuse me, singers and bands. And it's fair to say that she wrote some of Israel's most enduring and beloved songs. We need somebody with an 054 number to mute. Robert Feinerman, I'd ask you to mute too. Anyone who doesn't have a mute thing, please. It's not that I don't want to hear from you. It's just that I want to make sure that I hear from you at the right times. I'll note that Jeff, can you help me with the muting? Okay, so I still need somebody to mute. I don't. The 054 number and Robert Feinerman, please mute your audio. Thank you. Excellent. Okay, Shemer, like I said, died in 2004, and she was laid to rest in Kibbutz Kinneret, Futzat Kinneret, next to the poet Rachel. And so we actually have these figures juxtaposed, not just in my class, but in real life, physically laid to rest next to one another. The first song that I want to look at together is from early on, from 1958. It was a song that she wrote for Lahakat Pikud Merkaz, and it's not a war song. Many of her songs were written in response to Israel's wars, most famously the 67 war and the 73 war. This particular song was written as a way of documenting the experience of ongoing military readiness, the need on the part of everyone in Israel to serve in the army, and what it means to be experiencing life in that way. And her envisioning, her imagining of an end of days time, a messianic time, a kind of secular envisioning of a messianic time surrounding the idea of an eighth day of the week. Okay, so those of us who are familiar with the famous Beatles song, right? 8 days a week, I love you. What is the conceit of 8 days a week? If you want to suggest something that's above nature, that's beyond the regular every day, well, the regular calendar, the way we organize time is with 7 days, dating back to the biblical story of creation. That's how we organize time. So an eighth day of the week is lemala min hateva, beyond what is natural, right? Now, lest we think that the Beatles made it up, the Beatles song comes after Naomi Shemer. Naomi Shemer anticipated this with this 1958 song. I'm going to play it for you, and then you can follow along. I'm not going to enlarge the screen. You're just going to have the audio, or you can look very close to the bottom of the screen and you'll see changing images. You can follow along with English. I did send the poems ahead in advance. So I'm hoping you got a chance to look at them, because we may not be able to go over each and every song very closely in the interest of time.
Wendy, I'm sorry for cutting in. The quality of the sound isn't great. I'm not sure if that's the quality of the recording you're playing or because we're listening to it instead of directly through your speakers. So I don't know, maybe we can work that out. But you have to unmute yourself again now.
No, I did share the sound. I can start the share again. It's an old recording. So it is not 100% great, but it shouldn't be that you're not hearing it. Were you not able to hear the words at all?
No, we heard, but it wasn't. It wasn't. Maybe it was just the quality of the recording. I'm sorry for cutting in.
No, no, no. Let me stop the share and I'll check again to see if it's optimized. Hang on. Okay, I'd optimized the video, but not the sound. So maybe that was an error on my part. We'll see how it works the second time around. Well, I'm not going to play this song again, but hopefully it'll work better in the next song. So what is the central conceit here? If 7 is normal, then the beyond normal, right? The messianic time, the redemptive time, the time that we're hoping for peace, it'll be represented by this idea of there being an 8th day of the week. And this borrows from a deep Jewish tradition, right? That the exceptional is connoted through by reference not to seven, which is part of the regular order of creation, but rather the eight. L'mala min hateva. That's why a Brit Milah takes place on the eighth day. That's why the Chanukah Mishkan is an 8-day affair. That's why a Chanukiah is not just a 7-branch candelabrum, but an eighth. That's why we have a Gemara in Arachim that talks about how in Messianic times, the harp of the Mishkan will have 8 strings and not just 7. So Naomi Shemer is tapping into this tradition of there being something higher beyond the regular reality by referring to the eighth day. And the eighth day vision here is the vision that counters the regular military exercises. The chorus, that's Pizmon, is all of the chant of all the things that the Mefaked is saying, all of the need to do these military readiness exercises, and Ken Mefaked, right? Saluting to the Mefaked. And the alternative, the eighth day, which is not Shabbat. Shabbat actually gets incorporated into the eighth day. There's a vision of Shabbat in that end of day times. The eighth day is evidence of all of these regular military practices no longer being necessary. A shomer is giving out water to drink rather than fending off enemies. That plants and flowers are growing out of the barrels of guns. That, well, with this vision comes something of we know that Naomi Shemer had right-wing political views. So it has a vision of expanding borders. Right, she's writing this in 58 at a time when the territory of the state of Israel does not include some of the territories that she's mentioning. And so she's imagining going into Gaza. I bolded that because that seems so incredibly resonant right now. She imagined setting up new kfutzot, new kibbutzim in the Sinai, the other side of the Jordan, and so forth. But she's not trumpeting a military triumphant view. She's instead imagining a time when only doves are parachuting from the planes, and that barbed wire will be removed, and that the future will kihatid yachef sham yarut, that the future, a personified future, will be running barefoot as if on a beach. So that's early Naomi Shemer with Lakat Pikud HaMerkaz. Marching along in time, one of Naomi Shemer's most famous songs, Horshata Eucalyptus, which came out in 1962. She wrote this as part of a 50th anniversary celebration for Kfutzat Kinneret. It's focuses, the central image is a eucalyptus grove that was planted on the Kfutza in 1912. And the poem engages with this idea that as much as time has passed and things have changed and people have grown up, that there's a principle of constancy, which is embodied in the eucalyptus grove. Now, of course, what is so ironic about her turning to the eucalyptus grove as this principle of constancy, something that's unchanging, as if above time? Well, eucalyptus trees, and this might actually serve as another bridge to what we looked at last week with Leah Goldberg in her cycle Ilanot, which I mentioned to you. We looked at the pine tree poem, the pine tree song poem, but in that cycle was also a poem about eucalyptus trees. Eucalyptus, like the pine trees that are immigrants to the landscape of Eretz Israel, eucalyptus trees are not indigenous to the land. In fact, they were brought over to Palestine from Australia and from Tasmania. And so they are immigrants like the pine trees. Nowadays, why were they brought to Palestine? Number one, because they're very fast growing and replenishing. Number two, because they helped dredge the swamps and therefore cope with the problem of malaria. Nowadays, environmentalists question the wisdom of having done that, of having brought in these non-indigenous trees to the landscape. Nevertheless, the Horshata Eucalyptus is this potent image of the capacity of Zionism to bring about change and actively bring about change and help bring about a solution for the Jewish people. So I'm going to play Horshata Eucalyptus for you. I should note that it was written for this 50th celebration for kids to sing. And in that sense, it reminds us. I mean, we're amazed by the fact that like a kids play, like a tekes on a kibbutz, could give rise to such an eternal, enduring song. The only analog that I can think of is Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, which was also written for a school musical. So every so often it happens that you have amazingly talented young people being brought together with great songwriters to create, a piece of enduring culture. Let me know, give me a signal if you're hearing this better now.
הפכו סביבה בינתיים, אבל על חוף ירדן כמו מאומה לא קרה, אותה הדומייה וגם אותה התפורה. חורשת האקליפטוס הגשר הסירה, וריח המלוח על המים. חורשת האקליפטוס הגשר הסירה, וריח המלוח על המים. מעבר לירדן רעמו התותחים, והשלום חזר בסוף הקיץ, וכל התינוקות היו לאנשים, ושוב על הגבעה הקימו בית. אבל על חוף ירדן כמו מאומה לא קרה, אותה הדומייה וגם אותה התפורה. חורשת האקליפטוס הגשר הסירה, וריח המלוח על המים. חורשת האקליפטוס הגשר הסירה, וריח המלוח על המים.
So it's worth noting, even in this song, which is about, a kind of pastoral vision of a eucalyptus grove, the war is rumbling in the background. And this is a historical reference to the battles that took place in the 48 war around these various kibbutzim in the Jordan Valley. It's hard for us to escape the fact that even these beautiful folk songs that seem to be pastoral and lovely and natural about enduring values, they're just constantly punctuated with this awareness of war. And that's as much an enduring principle as the growth of these eucalyptus trees. And so that's why the beginning poem, the Yom Ched LaShavua, is almost trying to imagine an alternative reality, not almost, completely trying to imagine an opposing reality. Many of the songs that we're going to be looking at today have this oscillation back and forth between modes, a slow, languorous mode, like the first song in the verses, but then like a jarring, opposing, militaristic, or less upbeat or less redemptive sounding value. And in this song, we see the oscillation of modes, in the extreme high, right? We're shot very high and going down low. We'll see that in a number of different songs. This is just to give you a bit of material culture. This plaque, the sign on Futsat Kinneret, to actually show you, if you do a pilgrimage there, where the Horshat Eucalyptus is, the famous eucalyptus grove that she memorialized in her song, and they in turn memorialized this place after her. So 1958, 1962, 1966. This is a famous song, a memorial song about two or three people who grew up together in the same kfutza. There are various competing narratives about whom this song specifically memorializes. There is those that say that it memorializes the friendship of three boys, Zev Amit, Yosef Regev, and Yosef Bentov, who grew up together in Nahalal, one of the Moshavim in the Jezreel Valley. These are friends who worked together in the fields, who served together in the Jewish Brigade, and then in the Palmach, and then in the 48 War of Independence, during which Yosef Bentov unfortunately fell in battle. And so the song, it traces this similarity in their path. They did everything together, everything the same, until fate and battle separated them. And one of them lost his life and therefore was placed me'ever lagader, on the other side. So that's one narrative. Naomi Shemer said the song also memorialized two friends that she knew from Kvutzat Kinneret, one whose name was Gur, and Shemer's cousin Yankele, who served together in Sajera, and that's where Yankele was killed. And there are others who say really that the best way to understand this song is that it's about a whole range of comrades and friends in Israel's history who share this kind of profile. Those of us who have lifetime childhood friends know what it means to have that kind of long-standing friendship, somebody who knows you from way, way back, someone whom you can always pick up a conversation with, even if time has lapsed, someone that you can speak with without speaking, right? Know each other's minds. I have two friends that I grew up with like that from Toronto, where one's name is Carol, the other is Debbie. We don't live in the same place, and yet we have this ongoing shared narrative. One of them, unfortunately, her nephew, who lives in Israel and was serving in Gaza, he sustained a traumatic brain injury and is still recovering. God willing, he'll regain his functions. It's a long, long road ahead of him. My other friend, Debbie, who lives in Israel, has several kids who are currently serving. And so I come to this today with an awareness of how these stories of friendships and interrupted friendships and young lives being interrupted, going along in a certain predictable path, and then being interrupted by war, how this is just a repeated narrative in Israeli history. So this is Anachnu Shnenu Me'ato Hakvar. I'm going to play it for you here.
אנחנו שנינו מאותו הכפר, אותה קומה, אותה בלורית שיער, אותו חיתוך, דיבור, מה יש לומר? אנחנו מאותו הכפר, אנחנו שנינו מאותו הכפר, שדה ירוק, חצינו עד צבא, בערב שבנו יחד לכיכר, כי אנחנו מאותו הכפר. ובלילות שישי שרוח חרישי וצמרות שחורות עובר, אז אני אותך זוכר. תמיד בפרדסים ובשדרות אהבנו את אותן הנערות, אבל תמיד אמרנו אין דבר, זה הכל נשאר בתוך הכפר. ברחנו אל אותם המקומות, לחמנו בשלוש המלחמות, זחלנו על חוצים ועל דרדר, אבל שבנו יחד אל הכפר. ובלילות שישי שרוח רוח חרישי בצמרות שחורות עובר, אז אני אותך זוכר. אני זוכר בקרב שלא נגמר, פתאום ראיתי איך אתה נשבר, וכשעלה השחר מן ההר, אז אותך הבאתי אל הכפר. אתה רואה, אנחנו כאן בכפר, כמעט הכל נשאר אותו דבר, בתוך שדה ירוק אני עובר, ואתה מעבר לגדר. ובלילות שישי שרוח חרישי בצמרות שחורות עובר, אז אני אותך זוכר. לה לה לה.
Okay, so I'm going to stop here. I want to note a few things, and I'm going to welcome you to unmute so that you can participate in this part. What did you notice about the rhyme in this particular song?
Partisan lead.
Pardon me?
The partisan lead. The partisan song.
Oh, that's how you're hearing the partisan song. Okay, I'm asking specifically about the rhyme.
Oh, the rhyme.
The rhyme of the song. So if you follow through the song, someone going to answer?
Very formal.
Very formal. Very specifically. Often in songs, we'll see a variation in rhyme.
Repeating.
You might have one stanza using one rhyme pattern, and then it will change in the next stanza, or you might have a variation between the first two lines and the second two lines. In this case,
variation.
Excuse me, I need someone to.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, the rhyme is obsessively the same, right? Kfar, se'ar, lomar, kfar, kfar, tzavar, kikar, hakvar, right? There are very few exceptions to that rule of the ar, which in that intoned repeated sound makes us experience what it means to go together with someone else, another two someones, and have the same experiences. And only as a consequence of this war does that sameness get disrupted. They do all the same things. They play all the same games. They go after the same girls, and it doesn't even matter, right? It all stays, what plays out on the kibbutz stays in kibbutz, like they say about Las Vegas. Nothing gets in the way of this friendship except the unfortunate tragedy of war. And there you have that mark, that disruption is marked by a change in the rhyme, over legader. The death passing over into that other place is marked by a different rhyme. I also wanted to note what seems to be a very conspicuous shift between the sound, the continuity of the verses, and then the pismon, the chorus, which sounds, in a discordant way, kind of more militaristic, even though it's talking about Friday night. And he notes that Friday night, Leilot Shishi, is when a spirit comes over him. This young soldier speaker, or now older soldier speaker, who's remembering his fallen comrades. Friday night is the time that the spirit overtakes him and he remembers his comrade. And it's so, in the spirit of secular religious poetry, Shabbat plays a very significant role. This Friday night cycle, of course, Friday night's important in Israeli life. Friday night's important even on secular kibbutzim. It's even important for secular soldiers because that's when you come home from the base. That's when you get a rest. That's when you get together with people. But Shemer, in various places, shows how she is repurposing typical conventional religious tropes for the sake of being able to convey a kind of secular religious experience of memory and of enduring values. Now, on that vein, I wanted to give us a chance to listen to Naomi Shemer's song Akedat Yitzchak, which takes us to the 67 era. I think it's fair to say that there is no other episode in the Bible that has played a more central role in Hebrew poetry from the post-biblical period to the present. There are just eons of poems, piyutim, tefillot that avail themselves of allusions to the Akedah. And with the experience of the Holocaust and the establishment of the State of Israel, the Akedah has once again become a repeated trope, a way of being able to respond to the tragedies that have befallen the Jewish people. There is a whole tradition. I could give a whole course for you on Akedah poetry just in the history of the State of Israel in relation to the Holocaust and Medinat Israel. And then there is a subgenre within this tradition of Akedah poetry of Israeli women's responses to the Akedah. What Sarah would say in response to the Akedah story. Women who have insisted that they will not offer their children as an olah, if asked. There's a famous poem by a poet named Rai Harnick that was written before her, I think around the time of her son's bar mitzvah, in which she committed herself, I will not give my son as an olah. And then, as fate would have it, her son ended up dying in one of Israel's wars. And so there is this ongoing tension, uneasy relationship between families in Israel and the Akedah, the need, the knowledge that everyone is being asked over and over and over again to give up their son, their beloved son, the one that they loved, or their beloved daughter for the sake of the endurance of the State of Israel. Naomi Shemer's Akedat Yitzchak was written, it was actually featured in her very first record, and it was her emotional, poetic way of responding to the story of a friend, the child of a friend going missing. On Friday, December 1st, 1967, an IDF pilot named Yitzchak, his name was Yitzchak, nickname Aki Artzi, who was the son of good friends of Shemer, who grew up on kibbutz Degania, right next to Shemer's native kibbutz of Kinneret. He and a navigator named Elchanan Raz were sent together on a flying mission. This is before the Six-Day War. This is a flying, actually after the Six-Day War. They were sent on a flying mission to the Suez Canal to photograph an Egyptian missile base in the area, and their plane went missing. I'm going to play the song for you to so that you can hear the kind of drumbeat and the sense of which this is a very dire and sad recognition of this ongoing Akedah experience, and a wish, a plea, a kind of prayer that the sakin, the knife, the ma'achelet, no longer be brandished over the necks of our children.
את בנך, את יחידך, אשר אהבת, קח את יצחק, והעלהו לעולם על אחד ההרים, במקום אשר אומר אליך, והעלהו לעולם על אחד ההרים בארץ מוריה, ומכל ההרים שבארץ ההיא תעלה צעקה גדולה. הנה האש והנה העצים והנה הוא ריבונו של עולם המלא רחמים לא נשכח כי הונף הסכין, לא נשכח את בנך, את יחידך, אשר אהבנו, לא נשכח את יצחק.
So this is the first time that we've had an opportunity to actually hear Naomi Shemer herself sing. She's singing on that recording. Now, the song enacts two major differences to the conventional biblical Akedah account. Did any of you see those differences? Adina, I'm seeing you nod your head.
Okay, yes. First of all, Hine ha'esh v'hine ha'etzim v'hinehu hasel olah. And the real thing, in the Bible, it's the ephor hasel olah.
Exactly.
hasel olah. And then el hanar yatkal tishlach. In the biblical story, it's God talking to Abraham, whereas here we're asking God not to harm the nar.
That's what I was going to say.
Fantastic. So in this case, whereas Isaac in the biblical narrative is perplexed, like, where is the Sela Olah? Here, the song is acknowledging the fact that over and over and over again, our children have had to serve as the lambs for the sacrifice. And this is a plea on the part of a woman as stand-in for a mother that this paradigm not be repeated over and over and over again. We remember this. We remember that we keep on having to offer Yitzchak. And in this case, this song is commemorating a Yitzchak who fell. And enough of sacrificing Isaacs. Okay, so now we come to the most famous of all, Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. I think it's fair to say that this is Naomi Shemer's most beloved, best known song. A song that was not without controversy, I would note. I don't want to belabor it, but there was some controversy around the song on account of the melody. It turns out that it was based on a Basque lullaby. Naomi Shemer didn't acknowledge it until much later. So there was controversy surrounding the lack of originality in the melody. There was also some political controversy around the song because it includes a description here of Har HaBayit, the En Poked at Har HaBayit Ba'ir Atika, that there's nobody going up to Har HaBayit, when, of course, at the time, and to this day, there are those who pray in the Temple Mount. They're just not Jews. And so she, of course, was trying to acknowledge the fact that it was a travesty and a tragedy that Jews are not able in this historical place for the Jewish people to have access to these holy sites. But those who have a different political disposition than Naomi Shemer, they raise alarm bells about that. Nevertheless, the song remains one of the treasures of the Israeli songbook. And not just because it has a gorgeous melody, I would argue. Its significance for all of us is that it has a gorgeous melody and that it tugs at our heartstrings. But it also is a remarkable example of what I've been talking about throughout, of a Hebrew poet engaging in deliberate, well, we can call it thefts of language, or less provocatively, a deliberate system of allusions, a whole compendium, or you can even say an encyclopedia of allusions to prior sources about Yerushalayim, classical sources, allusions that remind us of those who dared to raise their voice to speak for Yerushalayim, that show her desire to be really taken seriously and incorporated in the tradition of Israel, of Hebrew prayers and of Hebrew songs. So I'm going to play Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. We'll go through some of these allusions. We'll do a time check to see how much time Jeffrey's going to let me have, and then we'll see what our next steps are. So this is Shuli Natan, famously who sang this song Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, that Naomi Shemer was commissioned to write for a song festival before the Six-Day War, a song festival for Yom Ha'atzmaut that was going to be dedicated to Yerushalayim. And she really struggled over writing this song. There are all kinds of accounts that talk about how difficult it was for her to rise to the occasion and compose a song that really was deserving of this important billing as a song of Jerusalem. Here's young Shuli Natan.
אוויר הרים צלול כיין, וריח אורנים, נישא ברוח הערביים עם כל פעמונים. ובתרדמת אילן ואבן, שבויה בחלומה, העיר אשר בדד יושבת ובליבה ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני יבשו בורות המים, כיכר השוק ריקה, ואין פוקדת הר הבית בעיר העתיקה. ובמערות אשר בסלע מהלילות רוחות, ואין יורד אל ים המלח בדרך ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. בבואי היום לשיר לך ולך לקשור כתרים, קטונתי מצעיר בנייך ומאחרון המשוררים. כי שמך צורב את השפתיים כנשיקת זרף, אם אשכחך ירושלים אשר כולה ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני כינור. ירושלים של זהב ושל נחושת ושל אור, הלא לכל שירייך אני
Okay, so you noticed, of course, that Shuli Natan's singing, her rendition of the song, did not include the last stanza, which was the one that was added on after the 67 war. The song was written and performed before the Six-Day War and was playing on the radio and was becoming extremely popular. And then it was if presaging, it was dramatizing the Great Lava Yerushalayim and presaging what it might be like if indeed we could return to these places. The last stanza was added on to actually take into account the the capture of the old city, the shofar that was blown by the Kotel, and so on and so forth. I want to go through with you the various ways in which the song can be seen as a kind of compendium or encyclopedia of prior references to Yerushalayim, and the way in which Naomi Shemer is conspicuously trying to insert herself as the newest, like Hachadasha, of the Meshorerim or the Meshorerot, by actually showing her that she's entirely conversant with these prior traditions. And there is a way in which her allusions are also capturing the sense of sadness and desolation in that moment before the Six-Day War, that we don't have that access, that physical access to Yerushalayim, that only became possible after the war. So first of all, the title, Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, where does it come from? Many think that it just comes from, the gold dome of the rock, but no, actually its origin is from a Gemara, a story about Rabbi Akiva in his early days in his relationship with his wife Rachel, the daughter of Kalba Savua, the daughter of a very rich man who did not approve of his daughter marrying a poor shepherd, a poor illiterate shepherd, and how she was disinherited by her father, and they were living in a barn basically, and they were laying their heads to rest at night in beds of straw, and so Rabbi Akiva would pull out straw, gold straw from Rachel's hair, and said, if only I could give you, I could crown you with the Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. In other words, I could give you a piece of jewelry that looks something like this, a crown that included the city walls as a representation of my love for you. His saying, I wish I could give you Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, was a lament for their poverty, but then Eliyahu Navi appears as a person knocking on the door saying, give me some straw. My wife gave birth. We don't even have straw to lay on. And so it's Rabbi Akiva coming to terms with the fact, well, their poverty is not the worst sort of poverty. So it's exposing this gap between what one wants spiritually, what one wants economically. The Yerushalayim Shel Zahav as an adornment, as a way of showing great grandeur, is also acknowledging the idea of an Ir Zahav, the Herodian dominion. The Herodian Jerusalem presence was one of great glory and one of great power. And here's Rabbi Akiva kind of on the lowest level of the social totem pole, yearning for something greater. I'll add another allusion in the song. I'll go back actually to the lyrics here. This idea of that the poet, the singer, wants to sing of Yerushalayim velach likshor ktarim, and to tie crowns for you. That image of tying crowns comes from another source, that in a rabbinic source that refers to Rabbi Akiva. It's a famous Gemara from Masechet Menachot, where Moshe rises up on high and sees, as if this is even possible. Like, we have to try and imagine what this actually means for him to see in an anthropomorphized way, to see the Holy One, blessed be He, sitting and tying crowns, kosher tarim, on the letters of the Torah. And he asks God, what's taking you so long? What's holding you up that you're tying all these crowns? And this becomes an occasion for God to say, these crowns there, the various tagim, the crowns that we see here in Safrut, in traditional calligraphy, Torah calligraphy, they are each jot, each kot, each thorn of these crowns, God says, will be an opportunity in many generations from now for Akiva ben Yosef, Rabbi Akiva, to bring all kinds of midrashim, to be doresh tilei tilim shel halachot, mounds and mounds, heaps and heaps of halachot will come from each jot and tittle, from each little thorn. And Moshe wants to get a glimpse of what that would look like. We have this famous image of Moshe being transported, like time travel, to Rabbi Akiva's Beit Midrash and not being able to follow what's going on in his various drashot that seem to derive from Torah Moshe, yeah, and how dispiriting this is for Moses until he hears one of these drashot being quoted as Halacha Moshe Sinai. So this is a great imaginative rendering of what it would mean to have a rabbinic tradition that dates back to Moses, that is both innovative and traditional all at the same time. And we could have a whole class just about this midrash. But what we see sort of very tragically at the end of this story, after exposing Moshe to the great grandeur of what Rabbi Akiva is going to be able to produce in terms of being Doresh Tilei Tilim Shel Halachot, we find out at the end of the story about the tragic execution of Rabbi Akiva, the tragic ending of the story. And the word kutz, suddenly means not the tip of a crown, but it means a thorn, a crown of thorns, that Rabbi Akiva in this image is being presented as wearing a crown of thorns, which we might see as a kind of polemical effort to kind of take back the crown of thorns from another religious tradition. What this slight reference to Kosher Tarim gives us is the whole range of imaginings about Yerushalayim, its grandeur and its Churban, and what it means to be entering late, like Achron HaMeshorarim, into this tradition of both the glory and the sadness and the devastation. Halo lechol shiraich ani kinor, that image of being Jerusalem's harp, comes from a famous poem by Yehuda Levi, Tzion Halo Tishali, which ends with the image, Ani kinor lishiraich, that I am a harp for your songs. Kishmech tzorevet asfatayim kinishikat tzaraf, for your name burns the lips like the kiss of a seraph. That comes famously from one of the most central classic prakim from Sefer Yeshayahu. This is the Annunciation chapter of Yeshayahu, when Isaiah doesn't feel up to the task of speaking to the people, feels that his lips are defiled. Oh, oi kinidmeti, how can I speak? And at that moment, one of the seraphim that previously had said kadosh, 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 that's where we get the Kedusha liturgy. A seraphim comes with a live coal and touches Isaiah's lips with this live coal as if to kosher his lips for prophecy. And so here is Naomi Shemer daring to write herself into this prophetic tradition of being touched by the coal of a seraph. She's not making a modest claim here as one of the Achron HaMeshorim. She's trying to get in on this whole tradition. Moshe to Rabbi Akiva to Yehuda Levi. Add to it, there were, I'll go back here to something that I missed. Add to it the tradition of lament. Here we've got a reference to Ha'ir Asher Badad Yoshevet, so that's language of Eicha. In this stanza, Eicha Yafshu, how is it that the cisterns have gone dry? And of course, I should have bolded this also in blue, Im Eshkachech Yerushalayim, that's Psalm 137. And so she's writing herself into this tradition as this new coming, emerging woman songwriter into the whole hallowed tradition. I'm doing a time check, Jeff.
You're okay. You're okay.
I'm good. Okay. So now we're moving from 67 to 73. I want to briefly touch on two very famous 1973 war songs. You'll be able to read more about these 73 war songs after this class, because Jeff is going to be sending out an article that I wrote for Tradition, which he edits, that is specifically devoted to Naomi Shemer's songs of to songs of the 1973 war, with Naomi Shemer being a major highlight of this.
It's already there, folks. It's in the chat. You can get the link in the chat to Wendy's article, Hebrew Poetry, Prayer, and Translation. Naomi Shemer and songs of the Yom Kippur War.
So the first song that I want to bring to your attention is called B'chol Shana Bastav Giora. Every year since 1973, in the fall, because of course we know that the Yom Kippur War took place in the fall, she remembers Giora. Giora, once again, was someone she knew, a family friend, the son of Naomi's childhood friends, Ruth and Shlomo, whose name was Giora, who was 20 years old when he was killed after crossing the Suez Canal on October 20th, 1973. And so this is a song about the cyclical nature of grief, of lament, and of commemoration, and what it means every year for this memory to be evoked by the weather of fall. That come fall, the crazy wind in my garden cuts down my best roses. I'll note that the word cuts in Hebrew is orefet et meitav hashoshanim. Orefet, that verb is not like kotzetzet, gozeret. It's a specific allusion to Dvarim Kaf Aleph, to the episode, the issue of the Egla Arufa, or the laws concerning the Egla Arufa, where a murder has been committed near a city, but nobody knows the circumstances. No one knows who committed the murder. And so the ritual of the Egla Arufa is a way of acknowledging that a crime was committed and saying, we're not responsible for this crime. Now, what, of course, would be the significance in a poem, a song written in the aftermath of the Yom Kippur War, of alluding to the episode of the Egla Arufa? Does anyone? And I would say that that this whole question, I'm asking us to consider this not only in light of 1973, but in the terrible way in which history has repeated itself in given the events of October 7th. Adina.
Yeah, I think it has to do with taking responsibility for the fashla, for the terrible, I don't know how to say in English, but the terrible
the mechdal, the blunder,
yeah, in 73, and then unfortunately again on October 7th.
Yes, so part of this is a recognition that the Ziknei Ha'ir, the government, those in power, those responsible, that there'll have to be a reckoning, in the same way that there needed to be a reckoning after the end of the 73 war about what went on, that there's going to have to be a reckoning after this war. God willing, we should just get to that moment where we can finally, where the state of Israel and Jewish people can feel the respite long enough to be able to have the wherewithal to do that reckoning. So I'm going to play Bechol Shana Bastav Giora. I'll also note the way in which Naomi Shemer refers to the young people in that she knows, this younger generation, that she expected that they will be Ezri, that we will be able to turn to the army and turn to our young folk to help us, our source of help. And the question, when unfortunately these precious young people are lost, is me'ayin yavo Ezri. Of course, we know since October 7th, those of us who live in traditional communities that have adopted the practice of reciting Tehillim in this dire time, among the Tehillim that are traditionally recited in difficult times is Psalm 121, Shir Lamalot Esa Enai El Harim Me'ayin Yavo Ezri. And so history is repeating itself in that we're actually engaged, if not daily, regularly each week in reciting this psalm, wondering from whence will come our help.
בכל שנה בסתיו גיורא הרוח המטורפת בגנים עורפת את מיטב השושנים בכל שנה בסתיו גיורא אשא עיניי תמיד, מאין יבוא עזרי בכל שנה, בכל שנה בסתיו, בכל שנה בסתיו, בכל שנה בסתיו, בכל שנה בסתיו. אתה אינך לבד גיורא, כי במקום שבו אתה שוכן, שוכנים החסד והחן, ושם יחיעם עוד שר לו ומריח, טוביה מגדל עדיין איריסים שחורים ונדירים, ושם אתה ושם המון הצעירים, אשר אמרתי כי מהם יבוא עזרי. בכל שנה בסתיו, בכל שנה בסתיו, בכל שנה בסתיו.
So I just want to note a possible ironic double meaning to this offer of comfort that the poet speaker is extending to Giora. For in the place where you dwell, chen v'chesed, grace and compassion dwell as well. Well, what does that mean to say that in the place where you dwell, in other words, where you lay dead, that chen and chesed are there as well? Is that a source of comfort? Or is that an ironic suggestion that in this circumstance of war, where is chen and chesed? That it is that has also been laid to rest. Now, the more famous 1973 war song that everyone associates with the Yom Kippur War is Lu Yihi, Let It Be, our version of Let It Be. At the time that Naomi Shemer was considering writing this song, the Beatles' Let It Be was playing over and over and over and over again on the radio. And Chava Alberstein, who sang a lot of Naomi Shemer's songs. We also heard her last week singing some of Leah Goldberg's poems. Naomi Shemer, Chava wanted Naomi to write her a song. And at first, she had been thinking of simply translating the Beatles' Let It Be. But then instead, she decided to do her version of Let It Be, Lu Yihi, that instead of going from low to high, starts from high to low. Right? So when I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, right? From low to high, as opposed to, Ad yesh mifras lavan ba'ofek mulanan shachor kaved, right? So she, in a sense, flipped that musical order. But she did a lot more than that. But because of course we know Mother Mary comes to me, that very Christian quality of Let It Be is not what Lu Yihi is. Lu Yihi, in fact, specifically engages with a number of significant moments in Jewish textual history. I'm going to play Lu Yihi for you and then say a few things specifically about the way in which this song was acknowledged to have functioned as a secular prayer for people, especially the families of soldiers in the 73 war. I'll be sharing a letter for you that was sent. I mean, Naomi Shemer received scores of letters from people about Lu Yihi, but I'm going to be sharing one in particular, and it will help round out my argument about how these sorrow songs both function as new forms of prayer, and that they also function as a form of resilience in times of trauma.
עוד יש מפרש לבן באופק מול ענן שחור כבד, כל שנבקש לו יהי. ואם בחלונות הערב אור נרות החג רואה, שנבקש, לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש, לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש, לו יהי. אם המבשר עומד בדלת, תן מילה טובה בפיו, כל שנבקש, לו יהי. אם נפשך למות שואלת, מפריחה ומאסיף, כל שנבקש, לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש, לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש, לו יהי. מה קול ענות אני שומע, קול שופר וקול תופים, כל שנבקש, לו יהי. לא תשמע בתוך כל אלה גם תפילה אחת מפי, כל שנבקש, לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש, לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש, לו יהי. בתוך שכונה קטנה מוצלת, בית קט עם גג אדום, כל שנבקש, לו יהי. זה סוף הקיץ, סוף הדרך, תן להם לשוב הלום, כל שנבקש, לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש, לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש, לו יהי. לו יהי, לו יהי, אנא לו יהי, כל שנבקש, לו יהי. לו יהי.
So I could see from people's faces on the screen. And I feel it myself. What it is to experience this song together at this time. The high and the low. In this case, the high, I would here I'm doing an analysis of the music rather than the words. We'll get to the words in just a sec. The high, for me, I experience this as the high pitch of anxiety, of a sudden attack, and the desire for the thing to come down from its high pitch. I argued at the beginning that this is, it wasn't enough for Naomi Shemer in her mind to simply translate the Beatles lyrics, that she Judaized this prayer. I'm inviting you to unmute. Where do you see the Judaization, the Jewification of Let It Be? Where are the markers of specific Jewishness, either ritual or textual, Hebraist, or Zionist?
So the simplest is the holiday candles, Shabbat in the window, and then also the shofar, of course, and the drums. And of course, there is a mention of prayer. And then I always think end of summer heralds the coming of the Yom Tovim, Rosh Hashanah, and all of that. And it's the pathway, you know, that you're going into the Yamim Norim after the end of summer.
Thank you. That's excellent. And anyone else? Sarah, did you want to say something? I see you unmuted.
I'm wondering about the Egel Hazahav.
Yes.
What is the sound I'm hearing?
Okay, excellent. So that's a very important reference when Moshe comes down from having received the Torah, and there's this sound of this indiscriminate sound, unidentified sound coming from the camp. We know that we know, the reader knows that it's because of the Egel Zahav. Moshe and Yoshua are trying to figure out what this song is, and they're saying, Ma kolanot. What is this song that I'm hearing? Ein kol anot gvura, ein kol anot chalusha, kol anot ani shomea. Anot in the first two instances is the kal form la anot, to answer, but then the third is the PL, which means to suffer. I'm hearing the sound of suffering. I'm hearing some kind of moment of suffering. Now, we don't know. I've looked at the manuscript. I have not seen a vocalization that can determine for me whether it's the Kal or the PL, but it's clear that Naomi Shemer was invoking this moment of great perfidy, of great fear, that it presages, in fact, the slaughter of a number of Israelites. And so it's this question of what is this, in the midst of the Yamim Noraim, in the midst of what should have been Yom Kippur and the holiness of Yom Kippur, we're hearing another Kol Anot, a very disruptive Kol Anot. And so Shemer takes us into this world where what we expect, a holiness that we expect, albeit, she might have had a very secular version of it in mind, and yet it's a secular version that seems to go hand in hand, hand in glove with Jewish Hebraic tradition, is being pitted against great danger. And in all of this is this plaintive prayer. Let it be that the bad is turned into good, that we can cling to some sort of positivity, that if there is a mevaser, by the way, this stanza that I've marked out in red is often omitted from singing of this song because it's so painful and on the nose. What it's referring to is the role of a mevaser, a bringer of bad tidings, the military knocking on the door to say that your family member has been lost. And so here it's this as if redemptive plea and prayer. Let it be that if someone's knocking on the door, it's not for ill, but for good. Let it be that we return to this image, this Zionist archetypal image of white houses with red roofs, of the quiet pastoral vision of a kvutza, of the kibbutz. I'm going to conclude with this song, but like I said, I wanted to talk to you just for a sec about what the song meant for the Israeli public, what it meant for so many families in the 73 war. This, I've translated part for you of a letter that's held in the archives of the National Library, pardon me, library is misspelled here, of Israel, from the Senesh family, who wrote to Naomi Shemer saying to Mrs. Naomi Shemer, the Gveret Naomi Shemer hayekara shalom rav, greetings. And she quotes the mom, let it be, please let it be, everything we seek, Lu Yihi. These words and the rest of the wonderful lyrics of your song played in our heads during the 5 weeks that we knew nothing about our son David. They helped me get through the most difficult time until we heard word that our son was in captivity in Egypt. This song was like a prayer to me, the sort of prayer that helps a person and calms them down. Now that our son has come back healthy and whole, we wanted to share our joy with you, with heartfelt thanks to the Senesh family. I felt as I was preparing for this final class that this would be a very fitting way for us together to use Lu Yihi as a prayer, knowing that there are still so many precious souls that are being held in captivity and so many precious soldiers whose lives are at risk, that all of this can end, that songs, a song like this that it can help us get through these times, and that we can come to the other end where we there will be a postscript where we can just turn to these moments with heartfelt thanks and gratitude that those we love are no longer in harm and that everyone is healthy and whole. I will send the slides for you, which also include Ala Dvashva Ala Oket, which was the last song that I wanted to talk with you, but I realized that there was just so much I wanted to accomplish, and Hayom Katzar V'Amlacha Meruba. So you'll be able to get the slides, also a written transcript of pretty much everything that I presented today. So I'll share that with Jeffrey too.
Wendy, thank you so much. You must promise us that if unfortunately through no cause of your own we had a little more okets this year, that next year you'll come back with a series that'll be Kulo Dvash, love songs, romantic poetry, happiness, and that'll be our focus. Please God,
I'd be
please God,
delighted.
on your next round. We'd love to have you back. We're so glad that we were able to involve you in these online Zooms. We're hoping that there'll be much more English programming here on the Beit Agnon Zoom. Please stay posted. If you are one of those Facebook people, give us a like on Facebook. You should be getting emails from us. If not, send me your email so we can add you to the list. In the chat, you'll see there are links both to, of course, you may have heard, Wendy and I, we're going to Poland. I saw David Bernstein was online with us also for a while. He's our trusty guide. If you'd like to join us in Poland, please do. Download Wendy's article or the whole issue of Tradition, which was unfortunately, the nature of things was we put out an issue talking about the Yom Kippur War, thinking we were talking about ancient history. After all, it was 50 years ago, not knowing, of course, that almost immediately after the issue arrived in September, the past became prologue, and it became tragically relevant in ways we neither anticipated nor wanted. But especially to read Wendy's article, which goes much deeper on some of the things we spoke about tonight about Naomi Shemer. And next week, a week from tonight, at this same time, join myself and Professor Netta Stahl to talk about our contributions to the Jewish Review of Books issue about October 7th, and particularly using Agnon's writing as a lens to understand our tragic and traumatic situation. So again, thank you all so very much. I think we have a little bit of time for some questions or comments. If people want to stay on, I'm sure Wendy would be happy to engage with you on that. It did post in the chat a picture of the manuscript of Lu Yahi. Those of you that are in Jerusalem or that come to visit, you obviously must go to the new National Library and take the tour. And part of the tour, which you can really only see if you're part of an organized tour because it's not open to the public on its own, is this exhibit of like the treasures of the archives of the National Library. And of course, there are the handwritten manuscripts of Shai Agnon, and there are the manuscripts of Leah Goldberg and of Rachel HaMishoreret, and so many other figures we spoke about. And of course, here is the selection from Naomi Shemer, is the manuscript page of Lu Yahi, the song we concluded with. So I'll stop talking now, but you're welcome to open your microphone and chime in with your thoughts, comments, questions, and Wendy will get the last word.
Wendy.
Yes, Elaine.
You know how it's true that the Siddur, there's nothing in there from women. But I'm meaning to ask you this last week. I went to a shiur that traced the, Ashani Kirtsono, who've made me according to his will. And according to this, because the rabbi said, who do you think wrote this? And I said, a man. And he said, Elaine Mendelow, no. The women asked for this prayer. They wrote it and it was put in. Do you know anything about that?
I do not, but I can go and chase after
I don't mean it. Anyway, it always fascinated me. The second thing is with the Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, I don't know where I got this, but it was sort of an accessory, like a tiara of the time. And I always think we had an Parsha this week about the high priest and the gold on his mitre.
So this idea that Yerushalayim Shel Zahav was a crown, so it was represented visually. I don't know if you got a chance to see it in the slide where I showed it. That
yes,
it was a specific type of crown that used the skyline,
yes.
and in fact, I big miss on my part. In the past, when I've taught this, I've worn this pin that of my mother-in-law's that has that kind of outline. You see that in contemporary Israeli jewelry.
Oh, so the point is that I just think somehow it's connected with the high priest's mitre of that gold piece that's on. I don't know whether it's been traced or whatever, but it just seems too coincidental.
Well, that the mitre had that shape.
Well, I was looking at the pictures in the back of the art scroll, this Parsha, and it has this, the high priest has all this stuff, but then there's this kind of gold crown, this piece of gold. It's in the art scroll back or whatever.
That seats.
Yeah, I don't know if that is a direct link, but specifically because crowns, I mean, are just a universal symbol of someone with elite aristocratic high status. But the idea specifically that the city is part, that the topography of the city is part of the glory, that can only be operative when the city is in a state of glory, right? And so Herodian Jerusalem was one of those moments.
Mm-hmm.
That Rabbi Akiva's life kind of traverses the high and the low.
I'll have to look. Something was written on it, but I've forgotten what. Maybe Jeffrey remembers. You remember something is written on that high
Kodesh
priest.
Lashem. Kodesh Lashem. This is the tzitz.
Okay.
It's not a mitre. A mitre is a hat. The tzitz was it. I mean, it kind of looked like a hairband, as it were, but it was a kind of half crown worn around his head, and only the Kohen Gadol wore it. And it said Kodesh Lashem, holy for God. Wendy, there's a question from Larry Magarick, who I'm not sure if he's still online with us. He asks about what's available of Naomi Shemer's writings, lyrics in translation, aside from, of course, the translations that you've done.
So online you can find, Hebrew song translations, but not much. I mean, there is not. There are studies of individual songs. There's a whole book that was written about the history of Yerushalayim Shel Zahav by a scholar, but not much. And so part of my work has been an effort to try and bring more of this material that's second nature and organic in Israeli life to an English reading audience.
Wendy?
Yes. Hi, Dana.
Hi. I don't have it in front of me, and interestingly, because I have the text of Lu Yahi in this songbook, and it doesn't have the paragraph of Hamavaser. Can you elucidate the latter part of that? Im yeshev nafshecha lamot or mashu kazeh.
That was a really hard line to translate. I think that if you're the best that I can get is if you're in a despairing state, especially at at a time when the natural cycle would be a positive, upbeat time, let it be that it can be overturned. That's how I can read it, right? So she says, Im naftacha lamut shoelet. So if you're feeling despairing, I mean, almost suicidal, maybe you're despairing there won't be pricha or there won't be asif, because the October time is that time of gathering. Springtime is the time of pricha. Sukkot commemorates the gathering in of the harvest. Nevertheless, Lu Yahi, let it be that the bad is overturned for the good. I think that that is the very difficult stanza both to translate and also to cope with.
Yeah.
One of I had written down in my notes also to acknowledge this idea of the mevaser omed badelet, that nightmare for every Israeli family. That nightmare got dramatized in an unforgettable and chilling way by the novelist David Grossman when he wrote his novel Isha Borachat Mibsora, the conceit of which is that there is a mom who figures that as long as she's not at home for the door knocker, that she can keep her son who's serving the army safe. And then so she goes on this long tiyul throughout all of Israel just to stay away so that she won't for the door for the person coming suddenly to knock at the door. And then, of course, tragically, David Grossman's own son was killed later that year after the book came out. I mean, these things have a way of living beyond in the cultural consciousness in ways that Shemer couldn't possibly have intended. Anyway,
Okay.
thank you.
Anyway, we should probably wrap it up here. Wendy, Zierler, again, from all of us at Beit Agnon, thank you so much.